Going on to the most recent of your interests and your last book, if I'm not mistaken, which concerns women in power and, well, to be more precise, as you call them, female kings in late medieval and early modern Europe. So the period you chose to cover is between 1328 and 1800.
Yes.
So can you tell us, is there any specific reason for the greatest number of female monarchs and women in power? And you've actually said that between Catherine the Great and Margaret Thatcher in about 180 years, there was no female holding executive power in Western and Central Europe.
I think my exact phrase was no female head of government. But that means that, to back up, Catherine II of Russia was an autocrat. Margaret Thatcher was technically a subject of the recently deceased Queen Elizabeth II. So, but nonetheless, the recently deceased Queen Elizabeth II was not. She had 15 prime ministers, but she was never the head of the British government. Margaret Thatcher was for 10 years, matched now, I think, overmatched slightly by Angela Merkel. But there's a big fall off after those two, even today. So what happened, I think we can say is, or what I'd like to propose, I mean, this is again a guess. I began with that simple, bald fact, which is pretty striking, I think. How come it was possible to have a female autocrat, anyway, an unchallengeable monarch, Maria Theresa, who is simply the only excess there I was going to say is she's twice Ursula von der Leyen in terms of offspring, 7 versus 15. So anyway, why is there this gap? Well, I think the answer is the desacralization of monarchical power. And that's a rather elaborate way of saying, look, there's the French Revolution, there's the Napoleonic period, and by the time the dust settles, we have something called the rise of liberalism and representative government that finally filters out of all that. Well, yes, we do, and we have more participation by more ordinary people. That's fine.
And more ordinary women.
No, not ordinary women. When do women get the vote? The answer is almost in continental Europe, almost never until for at least a century after the French Revolution. In France itself, it's really very, very late.
I think Switzerland was latest. I think it was
Switzerland is an extreme case. First of all, Switzerland has never been a monarchy. It's been around since 1291 as a confederation, and it has more than one religion in it. It has upwards of 4 languages. My son is really impressed we fly Swiss, and so there are actually 4 greetings on the front. None of them in English. So anyway, Switzerland has had democracy for centuries and centuries and centuries. It is, in fact, Americans like to believe we do have one of the oldest actually working constitutions, maybe the oldest right now. But in terms of overall venerability, the Swiss beat everybody by hundreds of years, except no Swiss woman voted in any of these elections for all these hundreds of years until 1970.
I think it was 71 or something like that.
I still have somewhere in a corner of a ballot for the rise of women to voting status, because I think I was in Switzerland at the time that it was actually passed. So, yeah, losing my track here. I am very old. The failure then is saying that the liberal democratic movement, the French Revolution and Napoleon, actually you can make it more vivid and personal than that. One of the things I left out of the speech I intended to say was that Maria Theresa, the woman ruler of Austria with all those children, she had 11 daughters, but a lot of them didn't make it through and so on. But of those 11 daughters, there's at least a couple of them who were married to kings. And they are among the younger ones. The most famous one is married to the King of France. What happens to her?
What
Guillotine.
happens to the one married to the King of Naples?
Well, she is buried today with her head still on her body in Vienna, in the Kaiserhof of the Habsburgs. But that was because that was where she was exiled by Napoleon. And he was the second French government to overthrow her. Yes, she was overthrown by the Republicans in the 1790s, and then comes back at the end of the Directorate, and then is booted out a second time by Napoleon. She's deposed twice, which is probably one of the more dubious records for all the women in my list of. But she's not ruler. She's a de facto ruler because she's married to a man who doesn't care too much about ordinary business, and his wife cares a great deal.
So, broadly speaking, how would you say that such female rulership, as a broader term, shaped the political history of Europe? Has it helped normalize females in power?
It did to some extent back in the day, because if a woman, and we've experienced this now by saying, look, in England, this was a woman who was on the throne for 70 years. If you stay around for a while, yes, most of the people who are there when you're in your old age have known no other ruler. And so it's normal to have a woman as the supreme governor of a monarchy. But that's the only way in which I can see it happening. And of course, women are ordinarily followed by their sons. So things flip back to the default choice of a successor is a man. You know, in 18th century Russia, there are 4 female autocrats, and 3 of them all of them choose men as their successors. The men just don't last very long until Catherine the Great, who has the 3 sons by 3 fathers, the one who's legitimate officially becomes her successor. Oh, this is what I was going to say, actually, and maybe this is an important point that I did have, I believe, in the lecture, but I'm not sure. Anyway, it's Catherine, who is, of all these 30 women, the one with the most elaborate plans to reform the legal system of her state, the Russian Empire. And this is the nakaz of 1760. When is it? Late 1760s. At the time, she's working very hard on the constitution, therefore, of the Russian Empire. And she has read Montesquieu, and Montesquieu says the most important rule of any particular state is the rule of succession. And so Catherine was therefore trying to apply this and design a rule of succession for the Russian Empire. And she left an enormous amount of paper. But you read the biography here to read on Catherine in English, and probably the best in any language, Isabel de Madariaga, gave me it's a really vivid picture of Catherine struggling with the insoluble problem of explaining why she was in charge, because she had absolutely no hereditary claim. She was not even Russian by birth, of course, or royal by birth. So there is, no way in which it was, and she's extremely clever, and she was very good at work, and all those other things and she loved to scribble, and she wrote sarcastic plays about including her fellow female autocrat Maria Theresa. They overlap. And yet Catherine made 2 or 3 stabs at it and said, well, my son will succeed me. But then she could not actually create a legal formula that would justify her own position on the throne. So, if she couldn't do it,
then who could?
Right. So in other words, it's possible that, and it helps explain why there is, après moi le déluge, I think actually applies to Catherine the Great in terms of women rulership more than it does to the French king Louis XIV, Louis XV, who was responsible for it.
So, do you think that traces of old beliefs concerning females in power still marks the political landscape of Europe today?
No. I think that 180-year gap is long enough to say that it has to be reinvented. But that's a guess. I'm not here. You may be here long enough to see it reinvented, but I will not. Fully. Certainly not in my own country.
Well, you see in Britain, the last 2 or the second and third ever prime minister weren't really lucky when it came to the infighting and the entire political debate of whether or not they were fit not as women, but as leaders of their party and the government to just persist.
The British have a more arcane political system in terms of the current rules because they have a solid majority of one party in government, and therefore that party picks the leaders, but the system by which they pick it turns out to be very unrepresentative, and we all read the headlines, that England risks a lot of erosion of its reputation as a really well-governed rule of law. So, sorry about that, but after all, I don't do English history. I never, and of course, English law is the foundation of American law, and I am one of those people who really are kind of anti-British American. I am more comfortable in some ways on the continent, but don't even go and beyond that. I think we may even edit this part out. Most of it.
Right.
Okay. Anything else?
So, lastly, what occupies you, professionally and otherwise, in these days? Are there plans for some future revisits of topics you already covered, some new research, or?
Not really. I don't think I have enough done on numismatics to make a mini book, and I don't think I have the energy left anymore, and the concentration. Old age is there. As I said, I am easily flattered by saying I'm older than I look, and my body knows better, and it tells me it's time to quit. So this is a farewell address, or awfully close to it.
Then I'm very honored. So you'd say quit while you're ahead, I think is the expression.
Yes, I thank you. Well, if you're going to go out, it's really lovely to be treated this way. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
One Serbian actor actually said when quitting his career, when he was still, relatively young in these terms, I think he was in his 70s, And he said, well, it's better to get the people used to not seeing me where they saw me earlier than to see me as someone who's inadequate to be there where he currently is.
This is why my stepson was with me. Exactly why.
Okay, thank you very much for this interview, and I hope you have a pleasant day.
Thank you, Jose.